Welcome to Running Your Stories. This is episode 30 with Millie Troup. Thank you for coming along today, Millie.
No
we're going to have a chat with Millie, who at 16 years old has completed the Javelina Jundred. And I think it's not something we hear about every day. So
it's quite unusual, I guess.
Yes. So yeah, let's get straight into your story, Millie.
Sure, sounds good.
So we caught up before the Javelina when you were planning this.
A couple of months out, weren't we?
Yes.
We did the first little episode. We had a chat.
Yeah. So when we talked about it then, your sister Bella was also training with you.
Yeah, we were doing it together.
Yeah, so that might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
So
in the end, yeah, so me and Bella, we always had it, the idea was we'd do it together, because obviously Mum and Richard, our mum and stepdad, they've been running them for years. Since I think first UTMB was 2014. So we've been kind of in the world, ultra world, since then. But so me and Bella, it was our idea to do it together, our first 100. But sadly, in the end, about a month out, Bella got diagnosed with severe iron deficiency anemia. It must have been the start of September, and Javelina was obviously October. So she was forced to stop training, which is a bit sad.
Yeah.
So in the end, I had to do it. I did it on my own. She was supporting from England. She wasn't allowed to travel in case there's some issue with the blood or anything like that. So she was on text the whole time, like lots of capital block letters, texting, "Go, carry on, you're doing really well." But so in the end, it was just the three of us, which was quite sad. But it was nice we started out together and we trained most of it together, so it was still good to have that support all the way through. Yeah,
so just a question I'm going to ask, just to clarify this for the listeners. The Bella developing anemia, was that anything to do with the training?
Oh no, it was completely separate. Sorry, that wasn't.
Yeah, which already, I guess, I know that because I've been following your story and and speaking to you all. But I think the reason I highlight it is obviously some people have concerns about such young people taking part in such big events and in the distance and
everything like that. Yeah, no, it wasn't anything to do with the race. It was in the end, it had been going on since about February-March time, which none of us had realised. She'd been slowly getting lower and lower and lower in her haemoglobin, her iron levels. But it was completely independent of the race. She's also an asthmatic, so there was some monitoring there and training. We've been looking at her quite carefully and checking she was fine. But it wasn't to do with ultra running. I know there's been question marks in the past over whether ultras and iron deficiency, anemia, anything like that. But no, it was not the training or anything. It was just a sad coincidence. But
yeah. So you set off to the US. Where were you flying into?
We flew into Phoenix because we initially planned a kind of across the US trip, but when we knew Bella couldn't come, we decided it was a bit of a shame to do it without her. So we just flew in straight for the race. So we flew into Phoenix. I think we had 3 or 4 days there at the beginning just to kind of acclimatise, because it's obviously the heat we knew would be quite a big issue. So we thought it'd be worth getting there. Getting ourselves used to 20 degrees instead of English 10 degrees, because obviously it was October at the time, so it was quite different. And then also the race, it wasn't at altitude, but it was a bit higher than we're used to, so again it was a bit worth just being there for a couple of days to get used to being out there before racing. And then we raced and came back the day after, because Bella then broken up from school, so we came back to join her.
Cool.
So yeah.
So what was it feeling like flying out on to go and to do something massive like this? Were you a bit nervous?
Lots of trepidation, I think. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with 100 miles, I've said this before, it's such a big distance. It always feels really abstract until you're actually doing it. So I mean, the October before, when I said, we're going to do 100 miles, I had no idea really of what it would actually entail with the training, or not nutrition so much. We were obviously we're teenagers, we weren't that controlled with our diet or anything, but especially the training and the time commitment especially, I had no clue of how much it would actually take to put into to get to the 100-mile distance. And then, so even on the plane, I was still a kind of week away. I'd say it didn't really feel real until the night before, when I was like sitting there kind of on the bed just trying to watch Netflix, trying to distract myself from the race I was about to. I just did not want to think about it. But so even till, I guess, into the start line really, it kept just feeling, it felt so unreal. And also again on the plane, we'd all been, at this time of year, October, everyone's getting ill, so we'd all been desperately taking our hand sanitizer, trying not to, we all had a little bit of coughs and like niggles and stuff, so we were desperate not to get ill. So I had a cough on the plane on the way out. I was so nervous. I was like, no, I really want to start. This can't derail my race. So there's a lot of nervousness in the mix. But I think I was excited as well, because when Bella had dropped out, there had been questions over whether I would drop out as well, because we'd always gone into it as 4 of us doing it all together. So when Bella decided she wasn't going to do it, there was a moment where I was like, oh, do I want to do it either? There was kind of, it would have been an easy way out for me. And at that point, I just started a new school training. It was fine, I knew I could do it, but it was still difficult to fit it in. And it was still, I guess with any event, it's always, I didn't know whether I was going to finish until right before I crossed the line. So it was such a big thing. I was like, oh, maybe if I don't even try, then I kind of absolve responsibility. If I don't try, I can't fail. So there was a bit of a question, but I'd known, I was like, right, now I'm going to do it, I'm going to try. So I was excited to get out there and do my best, I think.
Yeah, as you say, it's a funny thing, because taking on something like 100 miles, it's such a big thing. You know it's going to be difficult, and you also know that during the event you're going to ask yourself, why am I here? Why am I doing this?
A lot of the time, yes.
And so now, in some ways, it might have helped you a little, perhaps, that you'd had to answer those questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
With Bella dropping out, that you'd had to think about, do I really want this? Do I want this for myself now?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually in that way, it was quite a good reality check, because it meant that the whole point of the US trip, obviously flights are expensive, it's a big way to travel because the UK races had an age limit, but it meant that the point of going out was just for the race. There wasn't any more sightseeing or too much of that. We made it to the Grand Canyon, but most of it, the focus was on the race itself. So you're right, I had to quite interrogate myself, like, do I really want to do this? We can't fly out there just to not finish. So like, what am I doing this for? It was actually quite a helpful point to really reevaluate, and it made me want to do it even more. The fact that I'd got to the start line after all the training, after Bella dropping out, so much stuff had happened, it made me, I think, even more determined. Right, I've got here, I've got to do this, I'm gonna finish it, I think. Yeah, I mean, like, that helped the race as well. Like, stopping just didn't really feel like an option. People have asked kind of, how did you carry on, and I'm honestly not sure, but I didn't think I ever really considered dropping out. I wanted to stop and like not leave the aid stations. At points of sitting down, I couldn't imagine ever getting up again and getting moving again, but never was there an option like, right, I'm going to pull out. That was just never really on the table, I think.
So I think, I was just thinking, it's probably worth summarising about what the race is.
Of course,
just as we get into it, because I know we talked about it on the previous podcast, and people hopefully will go back and listen to the pre-story if they haven't already. But so yeah, do you want to just summarise about the course, where it is, temperatures?
So the race, it's in Arizona. It's in Fort McDowell Mountain Regional Park. So the nearest city is about half an hour drive outside of Phoenix. So like I said, I had to go out to the US because all the UK trail races, I think they're now 18, I think 21 is now the base limit for anything over a marathon, pretty much. So I knew that I was too young. Me and Bella were both too young to do any of the UK races. So we found this one in America. It's quite renowned. Javelina Jundred is an 100k distance and a 100-mile distance. And there's also recently they've got a night trail, because the course itself, it's a 20-mile loop around the national park. So 100k you do 4 loops, no, you do 3, sorry. The 100-mile you do 5. So they've also got the Jackass Night Trail, where they just go out in the dark and do 1 loop of it. And it means it's quite fun. You've constantly got people passing you either way, because 100-mile, again, it's washing machine, so you reverse direction every loop. So you've always seen people come past you from either direction, so it's quite interesting. It keeps you quite interested. And there's the aid stations are themed. There's people, lots of in fancy dress, lots of tutus and fairy lights and stuff like that. So it's quite, for my first ultra, it was quite a fun atmosphere one. And also, I think my parents were quite, they're kind of reassured, because you came back to the same headquarters every time. So you knew that you had to drop bag there every 20 miles, you could get back to it. And every 10 miles, you had to drop bag halfway as well. And if there were any issues for dropping out, it meant that safety-wise, you could get back to a point with people and medical staff really easily, because there were 4 aid stations per loop, so it was only really maximum an hour between aid stations. So that was quite helpful for especially for my first one. There was quite a reassurance having that regular contact.
Yeah. And I've heard it said when other people have talked about the race that although it's not renowned for massive elevation, sort of not being a massively hilly route, I believe some of the hills start to grind on you when you're getting towards the 100-mile distance.
Yeah, they definitely do. So I'd kind of planned a flat one. I was like, right, okay, hills might not help. But actually, it does clock up about 3,000 metres across the 100 miles. So, yeah, I mean, it's the kind of hills at the first loops, you don't really notice them. But towards the end, I was like, oh, it's uphill again. What's going on? So, yeah, you definitely start to hit you later on. And I think in that way, I was quite lucky. We'd done lots of elevation. We did lots of hiking as part of our training process. So DOMS-wise, I was okay during the race. I never really felt the ups and downs. But towards the end, when my energy levels started to drop, the uphills, we really had to just grind them out. I was almost kind of slowing to a halt on the last lap. So It was definitely a kind of, I think I slightly underestimated the hills in that respect. I just thought, oh, it'll be flat, it'll be nice. Because you think desert, it was actually quite rolling. It was more, kind of Chilterns type hills. It's definitely not Lakeland Fells, but there were definitely the small rolls and kind of rollers definitely added up across the whole thing. Yeah. And then you add that another, I think we kind of knew it'd be an issue going in, but on the day it really was. The heat is quite extreme because it's Arizona, it's a desert. So it was, I'd say 20 to 30 degrees Celsius during the day, but it drops to kind of below 10-ish overnight. So it was quite a large variation. And during the day, being English, we're not really used to the heat. So we had to really work on keeping ourselves cool. And then overnight, we definitely had to bring out the layers. And my mum especially was just going slower than she normally would. So she was kind of wrapped up in 2 jumpers and a jacket and stuff like that. So that was another challenge. So I think, it was definitely an easier 100 miles than some British ones or than it could have been. But the things that I thought would be fine were actually, they were bigger challenges than I maybe expected, I think.
Yeah. So I think maybe we just talk through the flow of the race a little, because we'll come back to some of those points. But so what was it like standing on the start line?
So I didn't have too much time to think about that, because the way the park works, there's one main road in and the headquarters off to the right, but the car park got full very quickly. And everyone ends up kind of parking up along the road on the way in. So we kind of, by the time it's 2 waves for the start, one 7 a.m. start and the 7:10. So you're allowed to pick your wave, whichever one you wanted to go into. So we knew that we arrived in the end just in time for the first wave, but we knew, right, we've got 10 minutes more. So if we had missed it, we would have been fine. But in the end, it worked out quite well. We just parked the car, walked in, and by the time we got there, about a minute from the start, from the first wave. So actually, It was quite, I didn't have too much time to think about it, I think, which is probably good in hindsight. I just kind of got out of the car, walked in, and just went. And I didn't have too much time to stress out or overthink it or worry too much about it. But yeah, it was quite strange, because it's this thing I'd been working towards and picturing for a whole year by that point. It has been a lot of times in training I wanted to stop, or I had wanted to go out, it was raining, or I was knackered. I was just like, no, come on, Javelina, you got to do this. It'd been a large focus for such a long time that it was quite surreal, I think, just being there and actually it was finally happening. I can imagine that for lots of people, you've got such a big goal that when you finally begin doing it, it's just quite, oh my god, like, it's actually happening. It was quite weird. But it was quite good, because especially the first bit, most of it's single track throughout the 20-mile loop. So obviously off the start line, everyone's already bunched together. So we had to mostly walk for the first 5 miles or so until everyone spaces out. And that was quite nice to kind of ease me into it, because everyone around, and then slowly it's spaced out more, and then you're on your own much more. So that was quite a nice progression. It kind of eased into it a little bit, I think.
Yeah, well, that's that would certainly save you from making the classic mistake that people do on the early ultras, is going out too fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was quite wary of doing that. But again, it was quite helpful. I had my mum and Richard with me. We chatted through pacing quite a lot previously. We knew what our plan was. And again, with the rollers, the hills were actually quite good. They broke it up. I think it was quite different it's not like a canal or a kind of Thames Pass type ultra where it's just completely flat tarmac. There was definitely, the terrain itself was kind of a mix of sand and gravel, and it was quite rocky, so that in itself meant some places you had to kind of pick your way. Not much, but there were some bits where I'm not so technical as a runner. I haven't done much in the lakes or anything, so I definitely had to slow down at least to make sure I kept my footing. And yeah, it was single track, so it was quite good, and the rollers meant that you were kind of, well, for me at least, I was forced to walk. I'm not a good enough runner yet to run all the ups and downs, but that was quite good for our pacing plan, because it meant you had enforced walk breaks and it kept the speed down, because we knew that for later on with the heat we had to keep my heart rate quite low because obviously with 100 miles it's so big, you can never do it all in training. There's no point. So I personally wasn't quite sure how I'd feel later on in the race, so it was good to kind of go out steady and make sure, because I was a bit nervous about last miles.
Yeah. So what was the pacing plan?
So we'd actually looked a lot, because Ian Corliss we'd read an article about his, and he's he kind of proved he worked out all the maths. So if you out of kind of several kilometres, you could walk 5 and run 2, and on a completely flat you could still do about a 24-hour 100 miles. So we'd kind of read that and thought, oh, okay, this is about right. So in training for quite a while, we'd set 4 miles per hour as our pace that we were going to aim for, and anything above that was bonus. Anything beneath that, we'd try and get back up, because then we knew 4 miles per hour, if I'm not wrong, you do maybe 25 hours, and that gave us a 5-hour buffer, because it was a 30-hour cut-off. So we knew that would give us a good amount of time for the normal kind of loose stops, aid stations, sit-downs. We wanted to try and minimise those, because otherwise if you're more than 10 minutes sitting down, you get up and you're so stiff again. But we thought it had time built in for anything that went wrong, but it was still fast enough that slow enough that I could make it, and it wasn't going to be stressing out, like doing too high a heart rate or not pushing me too hard. So we'd worked towards that. We did a couple of 30-mile training runs and along the kind of process, and that been the speed we'd aimed to keep. And most of the time, over 30 miles, we tended to actually go more towards 5 miles per hour. So we tended to overshoot, but I think in the race, I probably, it was a good thing to stick to, because there were the hills, there was the heat, there was all the different factors that played into it. So it was nice to have that thing to aim for. It was good to have a plan in my head, right? I know this is speed we're going for, so if I'm over that, I'm doing well and I can relax. And that's just it was good to have an aim and have a plan, I think.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's definitely good, and obviously you've had excellent support on your first ultra, because it's one of the things that people tend to struggle with a lot in the early ultras. I certainly did, is knowing what pace to go at, how fast can I go, and so to have experienced people around you that can put forward something realistic that you can stick to, because it is really difficult knowing what is realistic until experience increases. So that sounds like it was a really good plan. So you get going on your first loop. So how did the first loop feel? Does it feel like a walk in the park, like a training run?
First loop felt great. I mean, everyone said, oh yeah, you won't feel the first loop. And actually that was true. I barely felt it. I mean, at that point, everything was so novel. I'd never seen the track before. We'd gone out to recce the course a little bit, but we'd only done a 5-mile out and back. So I knew roughly what it was like. And in the end, it didn't vary too much throughout the loop. But it was still, the aid stations were new, the people were new. I was looking at all the costumes and they were so exciting. And it was all quite fun and new. So that was... first lap felt great, and obviously I'd never really had a proper taper before, so feeling tapered was quite nice. I spent the whole 2 weeks prior to it nervous. I'm so tired, my legs hurt so much, I'm not going to be tapered, I'm not going to be rested enough. But actually in the end I really was rested enough and my legs felt pretty good. So the first loop, I think we went pretty quick. I think it was about 5 hours, if that makes sense. So we did it quite well. Actually even the first 2 loops, it was quite... we did quite a good speed, and then from there on it was starting to go slightly downhill, but which I guess is natural. But the first loop felt good. Second loop, I could start to feel it. By that point, I'd seen the track already, so it was a bit different. My legs, I was starting to feel it in my legs. But I think second loop, I started to get a bit nervous because my legs actually started to get really quite sore, and I was like, okay, right, if they're this sore now on lap 2, how bad are they going to be in 40 miles time?
Yeah, and that's something that still happens to me now, that I find that it's the kind of early middle part of the race that's psychologically the hardest, because as you say, that the first 20 miles you're just kind of cruising, it's all new, it's exciting.
Exactly.
The next 20 miles is when you think, I shouldn't be hurting yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, why am I already hurting? This is going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's quite strange. I was like, right, this is so early and I'm still quite sore and what's going on. And I think it was strange because actually, I think psychologically my almost worst bits were between maybe 40 and 60 miles, or maybe 30 and 60, because it suddenly, the kind of enormity of what I was doing actually really hit me, because I was like, right, it's already taken hours. It's been quite a long time already, and we've barely made a dent in the total distance. I mean, at that point, I finally had some perspective on how long 100 miles really was. Yes. So that's why I was starting to really stress out, like, oh, this is going to be so long. And I mean, towards the end of the race, I always told myself, right, the last loop you'll be fine, because you're going to grind it out, you're going to finish whatever. But earlier on, there's still that uncertainty over whether you're actually going to make it the full way. So you could finally have some perspective on quite how hard it is, but you still don't have the closure of, right, I'm nearly there, I'm going to make it, or whatever comes my way. So that was quite difficult, actually, mentally, I think.
Yeah, so I heard a little rumour that something happened at 40 miles.
A little sort of, yeah. So that was when I was suddenly around 40 miles I kind of had to walk out the station and just had a proper 5-minute cry and just got all of it out, which I think was one of my only ones in the race actually, which is better than I was expecting. But yeah, I just had to get it. Sometimes if you cry, it actually makes it better. Just kind of relieve the pressure a little bit.
I think it's in Scott Jurek's book. He has a 4-point plan or something when something gets really tough, and the first point is to let himself cry or scream or shout or whatever, just just kind of get it out your system a bit, and then the next point is to start the evaluation of what's the real situation. But his first point is to let himself be emotional for a moment,
let yourself react.
Let yourself react to it, actually, it's as you say, it can be good to get it out.
So I had my little sort of beer. Mum was like, "You're right, what's going on?" But but then once I got past that, I think then I started. Once I got to 60 at least, because I'd done 50 before we did the 50 miles in Shropshire over the Easter, so I knew that I could do beyond 50. It was kind of uncharted territory. But I think in a kind of weird way, once I got over 50, it was again a strange reassurance, because you're over halfway. By that point, it's not the home straight, but you're closer to the finish than to the start. So that was actually quite nice. Right, okay, at this point, however much it hurts, I'm just going to keep going. And that's what, like I said before, stopping wasn't really an option in my head. It might hurt, I might be tired, I can sit down at aid stations, but I'm not going to pull out. That was just never really a thing. I just wasn't going to let myself do that. Yeah.
So getting up towards 60 miles, how's your eating and things going by this time?
Yeah, so
enjoying the food.
Pancakes. That's the saddest thing. There were pancakes. There was pizza. There was burgers. But I couldn't eat any of it. I was so upset. Going into it, I was like, American food would be perfect. An ultra, you can eat whatever you want. It's a walking picnic. But then in the end, I don't know. I actually started getting quite nauseous from about, I think laps 3 and 4 were the worst. I couldn't get much down apart from water and watermelon. That was basically all I could eat, because I think I'd gone quite early on the Mountain Dew. I was loving it at the beginning because it was quite hot quite soon in the race, so it was really nice and kind of salty and sweet and really good. And actually, I think with hindsight, I think I'd overhydrated. I'd drunk too much of water trying to combat the heat, and I didn't want to get a headache or anything. I knew that heat could be quite bad and heat stroke would ruin my race. So I was like, right, I need to combat that and drink plenty. But actually, I think I maybe drunk too much. So I was feeling really sick throughout most of laps 3 and 4.
There's at least 2 elements to that. One is if you drink a lot, you need to replace the electrolytes and salts. And the other is there is a limit to how much your body can process. Which is the other mistake that people make. Because in the Lakeland 100, when I started that with and was running with your mum, it was really humid. On the Friday night on that, and I was drinking a lot more than I usually do, trying to cool myself down because I suffer badly in the heat. But I'd managed to replace my salts while I was doing it, and it actually set me up very well for the second half of the race.
Okay. Yeah.
I managed to get it just right.
Yeah.
But it's a
fine balance.
It's a difficult balancing act. Yeah.
I think with hindsight, I'd gone too far.
Yeah.
So, and my restaurant were good. They forced kind of pretzels and Pringles down me, and I could stomach. I was quite liking the Pringles and the crisps early on, so at least I had got some salt in. But it meant that energy-wise, I was probably getting quite low by the 5th lap. And I mean, my mum gets through 100 miles without eating. Like, it eats a cheese sandwich and ginger throughout the whole thing. So, I mean, I knew I'd be fine, but it was a hurdle that I hadn't really expected. I'd always thought that I'd be going for the pizza and everything and I'd be completely fine, and actually I wasn't. So, and that made running quite tricky, because there was points where I didn't want to run too much, because that made me feel more sick, and I didn't want to throw up or anything like that. So I was getting little enough food down as it was without throwing any of that up as well. So the speed definitely went down from, I think, mile 40 to 80. Yeah, because at the beginning we were almost on 24-hour pace. We were doing really well. Yeah. So, but then it was dark, it was overnight, it was tired, so it kind of slowed down a tiny bit. But I think, again, ultra nausea is something loads of people experience. It's pretty universal, but for some reason I hadn't really thought that would be an issue for me. But it was.
Well, it's one of these things. It isn't an issue for some people, it is for others, until you go there and experience it. You don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just mentioned you're getting into running in the night now. How do you find that?
It was strange. I mean, at the beginning I was fine, but I mean, the kind of 2-3 a.m. point I've been warned about from people who experience, like, yeah, that's the worst point, you're going to hate it, just, you got to get through it. And actually, yeah, I had my music with me, so that was really good, because if things started to get bad, or I started to get a bit of a negative thought spiral, I just plug in your headphones, just get some good music on, and that kept me moving at least. And I knew that all I had to do was keep moving and I'd eventually get there. But there are definitely points overnight where I was kind of like forcing my eyes open, like falling asleep on my feet, kind of physically nodding off. It was really, I hadn't expected that, because in Shropshire, when we'd done 50 miles, we had gone overnight. We'd have been in the dark for, I think, probably about 5 or 6 hours, but we still finished about 3 a.m. So we didn't have to do the full way through. And I know some people train overnight and do night runs on purpose, but I'd never really done that. So it was quite different for me. And in a way it helped, because it made the course seem different, because it was in the dark. So that was at least unfamiliar, which kept things a bit more interesting. But yeah, it was definitely, it was another thing to try and deal with. I had to try and keep myself moving. It makes me really respect some guys who just don't sleep at all. Courtney Dowell to like her 200 miles, she was hallucinating by the end, because she was just so low on sleep. So I didn't quite get to that point, but I've got huge respect now for the guys who just do 40 hours straight. I can't imagine how they do it.
No, it's another tough thing, and different people deal with it in different ways. Some people love their very short sort of power naps to get going again, and other people, as you say, push through it.
That's interesting.
And then other people, whose name will jump into my head in a moment, go on a 36-hour, setting a British record on the track, and he slept half the time, didn't he?
Did he? I haven't heard about
Dan
that.
Lawson.
Oh, Dan Lawson, yeah, he slept quite a lot, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which means you've got to run twice as fast to make up for the time.
You could have done loads more miles if you didn't sleep so much.
Yeah, exactly. If you didn't sleep, you'd be off.
Oh, actually, yeah, from listening to his podcast, it wasn't necessarily sleeping, it was trying to sleep.
And not managing. Well, that's even worse. It's not even sleeping.
It's not like I would run some more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but
so yeah, but
there's different strategies, I guess.
There's different strategies. So
yeah, I'm not sure I could have risked a power nap. Would have been out for hours if I'd done that. So it's better to keep myself moving, keep myself going.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of Coca-Cola, I think, was going down. Though again, I felt sick, so less than I would have liked. But
so I'm just realising, one thing I missed asking earlier. What time of the day did the race start?
7 a.m.
Oh, fuck, sorry, you did say.
No, it's first line, don't worry.
Yeah, so yeah, 7 a.m. So you'd have been going through to see the next sunrise.
Yeah, which was that was kind of my final turning point. Like, right, okay, we're near the end, because it was on the last lap. That was definite kind of tipping point, because in the end we finished about 9 a.m. 9 or 10 a.m. So it was actually, I think I might start at 6 a.m. I think it was 6 or 7 anyway. But it meant that you had the whole day. It was, again, desert. It was quite sunny. The sun set fairly late, so we didn't have too many hours of darkness. But by the time we got to the last sunrise, I knew I only had about 10-15 miles left, so that was quite nice. Right, I really am going to make this. That gave me a little bit of certainty. Though to be fair, those last 10 miles, probably the longest 10 miles I've ever done in my life. They went so slowly. I thought the last lap would kind of fly by. I was like, right, yeah, 20 miles, you're nearly done. It went so excruciatingly slowly. It was bad.
Yeah, you say that as long as you realise that you've done 100 miles faster than I've ever done 100 miles.
Have I?
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm doing easy races compared to you.
But, still, you've covered 100 miles more quickly than I have.
Yeah, true. Well, I have to compare times. If you go out to Javelina, we'll have to measure up. But yeah, it's true. It was. Yeah, I think actually, I mean, because obviously with my Richards template, 27 miles felt quite slow, but though I didn't really think about the time. All I wanted to do was finishing. That was my main goal. Time did not matter to me at all. So I was happy with whatever I got. But actually, I think I'm quite happy with that. It's quite a decent time in hindsight.
I think so. For the first time you've covered 100 miles, it's not like you were just scraping in under the cut-off time.
Yeah,
you were clearly
thing. Yeah,
clearly under the cut-off time.
Yeah, so now I was happy with that.
Yeah. You should be.
Yeah, and then again, I think that's one of my Richards things. If you spend longer in those stations, we could have had longer sit downs. Like at the point, I would have been delighted to have half an hour sit downs or whatever, and I was quite keen on that. And they kind of kept me like, no, you got to get out, you got to keep walking. But I think just the longer you're out, the longer you're on your feet. To be honest, I think it would have been almost harder in the last 10 miles if it had been 29 hours.
Yeah,
because you got that many more hours in your muscles and your legs. So I think I was quite glad with hindsight that we had kept moving. Though at the time I was like, oh no, can I sit down a little bit more? You always want a little bit more break time. Aid stations were like a kind of beacon in the darkness. I was like, no, I want to stay here longer. But in the end it worked out well. You just got to keep grinding out and just however slowly you're moving, if you're moving, it's better than staying still.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've very much got into the habit of looking at the aid station as just a place to pick things up, walk in, pick up the food, and then walk out eating it.
Yeah.
And just eating and drinking and walk, even if it's the next 2 or 3 miles before I start running again.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it's much better than sitting down for that time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's surprising how much ground you actually make up if you just walk those 2 miles instead of sitting still and then trying to catch up.
Yeah.
You have to go a lot faster to make up the same distance.
Yeah, and I've seen that with people that have been sort of alongside me going into the aid station, and they've sat there and I've gone out straight away, and then they've caught me up later, but they haven't put a lot of work in. And once you go through 3 or 4 aid stations like that, they don't catch you up again the next time.
Oh really? They just drop off, yeah. But I guess having to put that much extra intensity in just to try and make up the distance, it would be a bit detrimental over a longer race, I think. Yeah,
I think so. So you got to the end, it was around 27 hours?
Yeah, 27 hours, 14 minutes, I think.
I say, brilliant.
Thank you. I was delighted. I was very happy to see the finish line. It was a good thing to see at that point in time. But I was really happy. Yeah.
And so had Bella stayed up all night cheering you on?
I think she tried to. She was saying our grandma. I was like, no, you got to go to bed, Bella. You can't do it too much. But again, the time difference, it didn't quite work out. But I think they had a bit scared because the timing chip, it looked like we hadn't started lap 4 at all. I think it had a good 7-hour break until it got us back in again. So poor Bella went to bed thinking we'd stopped, which was a bit not great. But no, it was fine. We hadn't stopped. We carried on. And I think it was nice again. Like I said, the texts were really helpful. I didn't have my phone on for most of the time, but I was pretty determined. I knew she was kind of wanting me on from home and everything like that, so that was helpful. So
you must be proud of yourself.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and you should say so as well. You know, it's a very English thing to not
downplay it.
To downplay these things, but
I really am proud. I think it's one of those things. Okay, ultra amnesia is quite famous. It's all kind of blurred into one now. I think I blocked out the worst bits probably, but I had to keep. I mean, the week after the race, it took a long time to sink in that I'd actually done this thing that I'd been planning for so long, and I had to keep reminding myself that actually that was really hard. It was a really hard 27 hours. It's quite easy looking back to I was fine, I could have done it again, but it was tough. It was definitely tough in places, and there was a lot of times I sworn to myself several times, I'm never going to do 100 again, I'm never going to do 100 again. I'm now like, maybe I could try, but Yeah, it was definitely tricky. I think I'm kind of proud of my main goal for the whole thing was just to prove to myself that I could do it, and I think I definitely have achieved that. So that was quite empowering actually to show like, right, I can be in pain for that long and still carry on. And it was a lot of times I wanted to not stop, but I didn't want to carry on. So yeah, mentally it's quite a nice thing to know now, right? If I'm knackered in school and I'm doing prep, oh right, well I did Javelina, I can do another hour of prep and stuff like that. It's quite a nice thing to have in my arsenal to know, right, I've done that, I can do anything really.
Yeah, well it took me until 40 years old to do my 100 to have the same feeling. So to learn that at 16, like you say, that you know you can push through and you can achieve these things is, I think, going to really set you up to achieve a lot. So.
Hopefully, yeah, I think so. I mean, I really do think that I'm sure anyone could do it if they tried. I mean, I went from not running at all to doing 100 miles. I mean, I'm nowhere near the world's best runner. I'm not very particularly quick. I'm more of a casual runner now. I just go out a couple of times a week. But I'm sure anyone in my position could have done the same thing. As long as you put in the hours, put in the training, committed enough. I think it's generally something anyone could do. It's just people who have the grit and the kind of resolve to carry on doing it.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that commitment and breaking it down into the smaller goals, like doing your 50 along the way and things like that. And it's then a consistent progress towards doing it. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. They'll work at it for maybe a few months and then let the work rate kind of drop off. And
it's quite hard to maintain.
Then suddenly discover that they're nowhere near where they need to be by that time.
For the race, yeah, that's true. So, I think that's where I think consistency, I discovered, was really, really key. Because there's points where you feel like you're not going anywhere, and you have obviously training and speed-wise especially. That was the best measure that I did have, because I knew I'd gone from nothing to running, so my speed, I could see it dropping. That was quite a nice way of measuring my progress. But you kind of plateau for a while, they get quicker, then plateau, and then get quicker again. But I think in all of that, the bits when I was fastest was after a really consistent block of training. It didn't have to be good or fast or really hard training. It just had to be putting in the hours every week. And even if they felt like junk miles, it's still miles and still miles on your legs.
Yep.
And we'd always said, it doesn't matter how, in a way there is quality over quantity, but for us, in such a long distance, it was just like time on your feet. We'd always said that, you just need to be, if you can't focus around that day, just go out and walk for 2 hours instead. And obviously you can't do it all the time, you never get anything done, but it was more important just to be out there and getting in the time on your feet and just getting your legs used to being on them for that length of time. So I think it was tricky, like training around GCSEs across exam period. That felt quite hard at the time, like still trying to fit in the same amount of runs each week, and naturally they got shorter, or I had to run walks some just because I was so knackered from that morning's exam. But with hindsight, A, the running kept me sane during that period. I think I wouldn't have done the same if I hadn't been running, but B, the fact that I managed to train through that, it made me more determined when I got to the end, because I was like, right, okay, I've done all this training, I've trained through exams, for God's sake, like I've got to finish this race. And actually, with hindsight, that consistency really paid off. That was probably the main thing that contributed to my success, I'd say. Just the fact that I carried on. Yeah, it's shining example to other people. Thank you.
But, oops, sorry, I'll just turn this thing off now. So last thing I wanted to ask you about, and then we can kind of summarise a bit. So I know you've mentioned this a little before, but what do your friends think about you doing this?
Like I said before, the general answer is, are you mad? Like, why the hell are you doing this? But I think in general, I think it's quite cool, actually. I've been impressed, because before I hadn't told many people about it before I was going to do it, because I didn't want to add even more pressure. Obviously I had self-pressure, like I really want to finish this, but I didn't want to tell everyone about it and then come home and say, oh yeah guys, I got 60 miles and I had to drop out. I didn't want to have that set up as a kind of hurdle to another hurdle to cross. But I think so I kept it quite hush-hush before, but actually when I came back and told them, people were really like, oh, like, well done you, it's an amazing thing to do. I mean, when I started it in October, when I first thought, right, I'm going to do 100 miles, I think it's the same thing with them. It's such a big distance, it's quite hard to comprehend. But to their credit, they were really like, wow, it's an amazing thing to do. I mean, each different people have their own strengths, and so not everyone's going to go out and have, like, for me, that was a big challenge. Someone else might be a different big challenge, but they all could see the merit of setting and achieving such a big goal. I mean, to each individual person, that's still something really impressive, I think. So yeah, they all understood and were quite supportive.
Excellent. No, it's good to hear. Yeah. So do you have plans for what you might do next? Now that you know you can achieve big goals, so have you set another big goal yet? Have you got another idea?
I'm not sure. I think now I'm 16 and near 17. There's a couple of, I think, threshold events in the UK I can now do. I think so. There's a couple of 100k events that I'd like to try and maybe sign up for next year, just to keep.
I think you can probably do the LDWA events as well.
Yeah, they'd be good.
I
wouldn't have to walk them. I could. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people run those.
Yeah, exactly. So I think so. It's been quite weird coming back and still trying to keep running. Like not having that reason to go anymore. It's been like, oh, I've got a Javelina to train for now. Like, what am I doing this for? And I think I've still been going. The main thing, actually, the whole process for me is still I really do love running, and I know I feel so much better when I'm doing it, like mentally, and I'm doing a bit fitter than I was before and everything. So I've still been running, but I think it'd also be good for me to have another goal to work towards. I like having the next race, because it means if it's raining or it's cold or you don't want to go out, like, right, okay, now I've got this race in 3 months time, I'm going to go do it. So yeah, I think it'd be good to try and do 100k. I'm not sure, 100 miles I might leave it a couple of years before I go there again, but it'd be fun to try and do something with Bella maybe. Again, that's another thing going, but I'm definitely going to keep running. I want to keep getting my speed moving down as well. I had to do a school cross country meet last week. It was not a fun experience. So I've got to get a little bit quicker on hills and stuff. But
that'll come with training. It's just a kind of different type of training.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely different systems.
But they're not completely sort of exclusive to each other. You can do speed work and do distance work. You just got to balance it in the right way.
Exactly.
So, no, it's definitely inspirational, and I can't imagine how different things would have been like for myself if I'd been introduced to ultra running at your age. You know, it would have been a completely kind of different world for me from that point. So it is an interesting thing to think about, and just the fact that you've flown off to a foreign land and had the heat, the altitude, and I mean, I've just been out for a run with your parents here, and it's kind of muddy or roads around here, and you're talking about running on the sand and the gravel over there. There's all these different things that you've worked through, the nausea, the night running, and all those things. So, and then of course you get to enjoy the sunrise.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good moment.
Yeah. So no, really well done. It's
thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
It's and thanks for sharing your story. And,
no worries. It's been great.
I'm sure you'll be inspiring a lot of other people.
We'll see. I enjoy 3 runs a week for now. I'm enjoying less time commitment, and then we'll see if we can build it back up in future.
Yeah.
But just enjoying getting outside, being outside. It's been a good experience overall. I think I'm really glad I did it. It may have been tough in plot points, but I'm really, really glad. Yeah, it was such a good thing to do.
Brilliant. So. Well, thank you, Millie.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll just do a quick closing summary. So thank you for listening to Running Your Stories. In the next episode, which we're actually going to record soon, but will be a bit of a gap in when we release them, Millie's going to interview me about the Hard Worlds 80 in particular, but again, anything else that you'd like to ask. So that's going to be the next episode. So thanks for listening.